In the year 1100, the largest city in North America sat on the banks of the Mississippi River. It was not London. It was not Paris. It was a place that most people today have never heard of. Cahokia, a city of at least 15,000 people. Some estimates put it closer to 20,000. With enormous earthen pyramids, a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, and a reach that extended across the entire Mississippi watershed. At a time when the greatest cities of Europe held barely 10,000 souls, Cahokia was thriving in the heart of what is now southern Illinois. And then, around 1350, it was abandoned. Every last person left. The mounds stood empty. The plazas went silent. And for centuries, no one remembered it had ever existed. Cahokia began around 1050 CE, when Mississippian peoples, part of a broader cultural tradition that stretched across the American Southeast, settled in the floodplain opposite present-day St. Louis. Within a few generations, the settlement exploded into something unprecedented. The centerpiece was Monk's Mound, the largest pre-columbian earthwork in the Americas. Standing roughly 100 feet high, stretching over 900 feet long, and covering 13 acres at its base, it rivals the Great Pyramid of Giza in footprint. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, it was built entirely from soil and clay, carried by hand in woven baskets. On its summit sat a wooden structure, likely the residence of Cahokia's ruler, visible from miles away. Around the central plaza, more than 100 mounds rose from the landscape. Some were platforms for temples, others were burial mounds. The city sprawled across 6 square miles, connected by raised walkways and surrounded by a 2-mile-long wooden palisade, a defensive wall that required an estimated 20,000 logs to build. To the west of Monk's Mound stood something equally remarkable. Woodhenge, a series of large timber circles, each bigger than the last, aligned with the movements of the sun. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, a person standing at the center would see the sun rise directly over Monk's Mound. This was not a village. This was a civilization that understood the cosmos. But by 1200 CE, something was wrong. The population began to shrink. Construction slowed. The palisade was rebuilt 3 separate times, each iteration larger and more elaborate, suggesting escalating conflict. By 1350, Cahokia was effectively empty, not destroyed by war or consumed by a single catastrophe, just emptied. The mystery deepens when you consider what Cahokia was. This was not a fragile settlement clinging to survival. It was a political and cultural capital with trade networks reaching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Its people crafted exquisite copper ornaments, shell gorgets carved with religious symbols, and ceramic vessels of extraordinary artistry. They've buried their elite with thousands of ceremonial objects, including entire burial mounds arranged around a leader known today as the Birdman, found interred with a blanket of 20,000 shell beads. Why would a civilization like this simply walk away? Archaeologists have spent decades piecing together the answer, and no single explanation is sufficient. The truth likely involves several converging crises. First, the environment turned hostile. Pollen records and sediment cores from nearby lakes reveal a pattern of severe flooding followed by prolonged drought. The Mississippi floodplain that had nourished Cahokia's crops became unreliable. Maize, their staple crop, failed. Second, the land itself was exhausted. Centuries of intensive farming and massive deforestation for construction and fuel stripped the surrounding landscape. Without tree cover, erosion accelerated. The soil that had fed thousands could no longer sustain them. Third, there's growing evidence of social upheaval. The repeated rebuilding of the palisade suggests internal or external conflict. Burial patterns from the later period show increasing inequality, a small elite, surrounded by a struggling populace. Some scholars believe the ruling class lost its legitimacy when it could no longer deliver prosperity. And some researchers point to a single catastrophic drought around 1200 CE, a drought severe enough to destabilize the entire political order. When the rain stopped, so did faith in the leaders who claimed to control them. Today, Cahokia Mounds is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. one of only 26 in the United States. Mounds still rises above the Illinois floodplain, though now a highway runs within sight of its base. The city's original name is lost. We call it Cahokia after a tribe that lived nearby centuries later, a tribe that may have had no connection to its builders. The people who created this place left no written language, no carved inscriptions to explain themselves. They left only the mounds, and those mounds tell us something uncomfortable, that even the greatest cities are temporary, that a civilization can rise to astonishing heights, can align its monuments to the stars, can reshape the landscape, can build pyramids visible for miles, and still be undone by drought, deforestation, and the failure of its own systems. Cahokia is not just a lost city. It is a mirror, and what it reflects is the fragility of everything we build.